I'm going to come back up. I'm just going to cover my thread wraps a little bit, cover up the rest of that nylon, and you can take your fingers and you can again flatten that little plane out. If that loop up front bothers you, you can actually cut it off and then finish it just like that. So if you're ever production tying or want to tie a bunch of these, sometimes I'll do a bunch of weed guards just like that, glue them and hang them up, so I've just got a bunch of flies ready to go, because that's just a step. I'm going to see if that'll stick over there. Now you can add anything you want, like that crystal flash or some rubber legs or anything like that before we actually get to our hackle tail fibers. Just regular round rubber, a lot of times people will put on these. I'm going to take a single strand of black, white, and yellow, kind of your traditional froggy kind of colors. Those are going to be the same color legs that we're going to put up here, kind of where the frog's arms would be. And if you want to tie stuff like rubber legs or flashaboo or anything like that in for your tail that's going to come straight off the back, I'll advance my thread forward a little bit. I'm going to take this material, I'm going to wrap it around the thread, put it right on top. You see how you can kind of line it right up? I'm going to take kind of a loose wrap, but I'm pulling the rubber, backing up at a 45 and just winding. And you see how all that'll just kind of lay straight off the back, coming right off the back of the hook. And I'm going to come back forward and kind of lay it down. And from where I started that rubber, I'm going to use that space right there from where the rubber comes off the back of the thread to where I started it. That's where I'm going to tie in my tail feathers. And then I'm going to start my deer hair in front of that. Bring this forward a little bit. A lot of times on your diver style flies, I'm going to have the very back materials come to the point of the hook. On a popper, I would take it back to the barb, because you would end up putting like a collar of material, a thicker collar of material, maybe even palmering the neck hackle around to give it kind of a skirt, and that would eat up some of the space. So for like the dimensions of this fly here, you can see I want my deer hair to start about where my thread is. Proportions can be a challenge with deer hair stuff, and a good recommendation is buy a couple flies to use as an example for the same size hook. That way you can look at it and figure out exactly where your pieces and parts should start and end. With the tail stuff, it's going to be a little bit out of view, but you see how on a cape like this, how the feathers are curved? So we're going to use the natural curvature of the feathers on one side or the other to be the right or left legs of those frogs, or the frog legs. And I'm going to have white in the middle, then yellow, then olive on the outside. And so what I actually do, and I'll move over here so y'all can see, is laying them on your leg to get the tips and everything lined up is very helpful. So what I'm going to do is find a feather on this cape that's going to be kind of the right length and diameter. And I'm going to pick one. I'm going to put it on my leg, and then right about the same side, right about the same spot of that cape should be an equal sized feather. And if y'all can see that, one of them's curved this way and one of them's curved that way. So I'm just kind of getting them staged. I'm going to come to my yellow. And again, trying to find fairly close size. And I'll do the same with my olive cape here. This one's very ratty in the middle. I've taken all my sweet feathers from it. If you ever have a feather that's got like too much of a curl or a bend, sometimes a little trick is you can actually run it down the hook. See how I straighten that out? So you can semi-doctor your feathers to a degree. I'm going to try to find one that's a little bit thinner. Here we go. Here's my olive one. You can see this process can be a little bit tedious. And so sometimes folks again they'll kind of pre-grade if they're going to tie a bunch of these. They'll pull out a bunch and they'll just put them in a bag. Some of these are good, but the tops of them are lopped off. Let me find one up here. Here we go. All right. So I've got my feathers on my leg, and what I'm going to do is I want the olive one facing out. So I'm going to take this yellow one and line the tips up, put my thumb down, kind of marry those two, and take my white one, line the tips up, lay that one down, and then do the exact same thing here. This is when you don't want to sneeze. So now's the point where you don't want to have anything you got to get up and do for the next 3 or 4 minutes, because you're going to have all 6 of these feathers in your hand at once, and hopefully they're all equally aligned. So I'm pushing down on my leg to give me access to those tips. You can see how they're all kind of in alignment there. And then I'm going to take these and line the tips up with the other ones, and once I've got it, I press my thumb down, so I've got them all stacked together. I'm going to come in and grab them. So see how that works? Now I have got to switch hands. See how easy that is? It's a good point though, because one of the hardest things with fly tying isn't actually attaching the material to the hook. It's figuring out how to manipulate the materials literally in your hands and prepping them and getting them ready. So what we're going to do now is we're going to measure the length of what we want those tails to be. And again, you can also very easily, plop a good reference down if you like the symmetry of your bug and go there. But a lot of times you're going to be a length and a half the hook shank for your tail on a popping bug or a diver like this. You can kind of eyeball it, and then you're going to measure by switching your hands, holding the material kind of left and right. So I kind of like the looks of this here. That means I'm going to cut the material there, so I'm going to swap hands just like that, and I'm going to leave just a little bit of material to tie in those stems. You see what I'm doing here? I'm getting rid of all that bulky trash that I don't need. Now I've got all 6 of those feathers kind of lined up, and if you have to drop these, it's fine. You can put them on your leg, restack them, and your tips should be pretty close to one another. Now I'm going to kind of do the exact same thing I did with the rubber legs. I'm going to grab the tips of those feathers with my thread and get a couple wraps on there to secure it, and then I'm going to pull up again on all of them as I wind back, so all those fibers will be in alignment. Once it's on, if there's one that's out of whack, we'll kind of work and manipulate them into place. So kind of a loose wrap and a loose wrap, and then I'm going to come forward to kind of grab everything. And I'm pulling up again to get them in place. So you can see that there's one, the white feather that's on my side is kind of angled down. So just grab it, kind of tweak it up and back. You'll see kind of how you twist and manipulate these things. Sometimes you'll get it to sit right. That's about it. Sometimes I'll just leave those legs long. I'll trim them I'll kind of ignore them and we'll trim them at the end. But I'm just going to go ahead, now that that's all in place, and just kind of whip finish that and get rid of it. This is also a great time to add a deer hair tier's best friend. Put a little glue. You can kind of just touch the ends of those fibers, especially once you have them in place.
What kind of glue do you prefer?
Loctite Control Gel at the shop or at Ace Hardware or Lowe's or anywhere. Don't get the black container because that's the Ultra Gel. It doesn't cure rapidly. It gives you a lot of time. So if you're winding something forward and you want it to stay kind of pliable to really grab the material, you can use that. But for a lot of the deer hair stuff, the super glue in the gray and blue bottle will be key. And you can actually reinforce your deer hair flies at every step going forward with a little bit of glue, and it'll last longer than any commercial tied flies that you can get. All right. So now I'm going to add my gel spun because we're going to get busy here doing some hair work. I'm going to look at my bug and see where I am. A lot of times I'll put a little whip finish right where I'm going to start, just so the thread doesn't shift forwards or backwards. For the first section of deer hair that we're going to do, you can see the natural tips of the deer hair are coming out of the back of that fly. Kind of like you would do a collar with your neck hackle. We're going to stack the tips of this deer hair, and we're going to stack with the tips going backwards, just to have a nice kind of clean finish on that. I'm going to see which deer hair is the longest that I have. So whenever you're tying deer hair flies like this, we're generally using belly hair. The belly hair is very coarse, it's hollow, and that's what floats the best. It's also what spins and flares better than the body hair, the hair that would be on the back of a deer hair, which we use a lot for elk hair caddis and trout flies and stuff like that. So you always want to buy belly hair for